Monkey D. Luffy is one of the most iconic and loved characters in all of fiction, and is currently the leading figure of Shonen Jump. And just like with most shonen main characters, Luffy is no stranger to transformations. Across all 1089 plus chapters of One Piece, Luffy has accumulated a whopping arsenal of 6 different transformations, and today I will be explaining all of them. Before we start, I want to say that there are massive spoilers near the end of this video. There will be a timestamp that identifies the spoilers, so the video is good up until then, and that it would be great if you dropped a like and subscribed for the algorithm. But without further ado, let's get started. Before I get straight into Luffy's gears, I need to discuss Haki, because it is incredibly important to Luffy's overall moveset. Haki is the manifestation of one's willpower in the One Piece world and can be used by just about anybody. There are 3 different types of Haki, so we will go over them briefly. First up is Armament or Buso Shoku Haki. This type of Haki allows the user to create what is essentially an invisible armor around whatever part of the body the user desires. Like I said, this type of Haki can be used in a way that is invisible, but the more well-known application of Armament Haki is the type that shows a visible black shell of sorts over the affected body part. While the defensive kind, often called Emission Haki, is used as a defensive tactic, the visible kind, often called Hardening, can be used to increase one's attack and defense. The main use for Armament Haki is the ability it grants the user, which allows them to touch Logia Devil Fruit users, who are usually completely intangible. Armament can also be used to coat objects such as swords and even Devil Fruit powers such as Doflamingos and Katakuris, making them hit a lot harder as well. The only way for Armament to be countered is if you have stronger armament than your opponent. As seen in Luffy's fight with Charlotte Cracker, Cracker was able to cut through Luffy's armament since he had a better mastery of the ability at that time. After Luffy's crushing defeat at the hands of Kaido in the Wano arc, it was revealed to us that Armament Haki has an advanced application called Ryuo, which essentially allows the user to make their Haki flow into their opponent and damage them from the inside out. This basically just boosts the overall damage dealt by the user. The second type of Haki is Observation or Kenbun Shoku Haki. As the name suggests, this Haki grants the user a heightened sense of observation, allowing them to sense presences of people that they cannot see or people who are incredibly far away. For some characters like Usopp and Admiral Fujitora, their presence sensing has been shown in the form of silhouettes, while for others they sense presences by hearing voices, which also allows them to tell if someone is alive or dead, such as in Skypiea when Isa describes people dying as voices disappearing. Observation Haki can also be used to sense intangible concepts, such as strength, emotions, or intent, allowing characters to locate strong enemies and predict attacks based on what the enemy is feeling. As with Armament, Observation has an advanced application as well, that being Future Sight. Future Sight is, well, exactly what it sounds like, and it allows the user to see a few seconds into the future in order to completely avoid or counterattack their opponent. This ability will not work if you lose your focus during battle, as seen when Katakuri got frustrated with Luffy in their fight, allowing Luffy to land some hits on him. Future Sight is one of the rarest and most powerful abilities in the series, as there are only 4 characters who wield the ability. The only known way to counter Future Sight, in the anime at least, is to be overwhelmingly faster than your opponent, not giving them any time to dodge after seeing the future. The final and admittedly most simple Haki type is Conqueror's or Hao Shoku Haki. This type only manifests in certain people, more specifically people who have the qualities of a king, which means it's the only one that cannot be learned. Instead, it is an ability that characters have at birth, and it is awakened at some point in your life. For example, Porcus D. Ace awakened his Conqueror's Haki at the age of 10, while Luffy didn't awaken his until the age of 17. So it's an ability that manifests during a time of need instead of at a certain age. The main use of Conqueror's Haki is to overwhelm your opponent with pure willpower, knocking them out in the process, as well as an added bonus of being able to tame animals. This only works on people who have weaker willpower than the user, which makes it great for taking out huge crowds, such as when Luffy used it to knock out 50,000 Fishman pirates at one time. Given the nature of this ability, it's not very effective in serious fights, which brings us to its advanced application. At the end of Roof Piece in chapter 1010, it was revealed that only a handful of the strongest Conqueror's Haki users can coat themselves and weapons in Conqueror's Haki, allowing them to hit their opponent without even touching them, do internal damage, and just overall hitting harder. This can be used both offensively and defensively, since any incoming attacks will ultimately not end up reaching you. When two extremely powerful people, more specifically people who are either an Emperor of the Sea or have the strength of an Emperor, wield this ability clash with each other, it splits the skies down the middle, more commonly known as splitting the heaven. Now that Haki 101 is over, we can finally get to Luffy's gears, starting with Gear 2. Gear 2, introduced in Enies Lobby, specifically chapter 387, is activated by Luffy using his rubber anatomy to pump blood from his legs throughout his body, increasing his blood flow and thus increasing all of his physical abilities. His blood runs so fast that his skin turns pink and that his sweat starts to evaporate, giving off the effect that he is steaming. However, the drawback is that not only his stamina is being drained, but so is his life force, which leaves him completely exhausted after using Gear 2. Every move in Luffy's arsenal is described as being evolved to the next step, and thus all of his attacks gain the Jet prefix. Pistol becomes Jet Pistol, Bazooka becomes Jet Bazooka, Gatling becomes Jet Gatling, and so on and so forth. After the 2-year time skip, Luffy has seemingly mastered this ability and can use Gear 2 in short bursts, thus making the stamina and life force drain a non-factor in battle. Luffy also uses Armament Haki in tandem with Gear 2 post time skip, and all of his techniques gain new names, which have the theme of being named after different birds. Jet Bullet becomes Red Hawk, Jet Bazooka becomes Eagle Bazooka, and Jet Gatling becomes Hawk Gatling. In the post-time skip era, Luffy can also activate Gear 2 with any part of his body instead of just his legs. Also, just a side note, when using Red Hawk, Luffy's fist ignites. Like, it's not a metaphorical fire, it is actual fire, and I think the fandom has just come to the conclusion that the speed of this attack causes friction, which sets his fist on fire, and I just find that hilarious because there is no actual explanation for it. Gear 3, also introduced in Enies Lobby, is activated when Luffy blows air into his thumb joint and transfer it throughout his bones. Because that's how Luffy's bones work, I guess. Increasing the size and mass of the selected body part. While this increases Luffy's destructive power greatly, it lowers his speed just as much, and leaves him completely open once an attack is thrown. Gear 3 also has a pretty hefty drawback, shrinking him into a chibi form for as long as he was using Gear 3, leaving him completely defenseless once it's activated. All of Luffy's techniques gain the Giganto or Giant prefix when using Gear 3. Pistol becomes Giganto Pistol, Rifle becomes Giganto Rifle, and you get the gist. Post time skip, Luffy gains better control over the airflow, making the entire process faster and more concentrated. Instead of increasing the size of his entire arm, Luffy will increase the size of just his fist, making it easier for him to move around while using Gear 3. Much like with Gear 2 in the post time skip era, the previous drawback is completely gone, making Gear 3 an even more incredible asset to Luffy's arsenal. When adding Armament Haki to Gear 3 techniques, they gain a different naming scheme, mostly having the prefix of Elephant added to them, with a few exceptions like Grizzly Magnum, which is an evolution of Bazooka and Giant Bazooka. Luffy also uses Gear 2 and Gear 3 in tandem, giving us moves like Gum Gum Jet Shell and Red Rock. It's likely that this move is a combination of Red Hawk and Elephant Gun enhanced with advanced Armament Haki. Since this is a fusion of Red Hawk and Elephant Gun, this is basically just a giant flaming fist that does internal damage on contact. When using Gear 3 in tandem with Armament Haki and Advanced Conqueror's Haki, all of Luffy's techniques gain the Rock prefix, Rock being a giant mythical bird. Gear 4 is the ultimate combination of Luffy's Devil Fruit and Haki, and comes in 3 separate forms, each focusing on a different aspect of fighting. The first being Bounce Man, or Bound Man, depending on if you watch sub or dub. This form is focused on overwhelming attack power. First introduced in Dressrosa chapter 783, Gear 4 is activated when Luffy coats his arm in armament haki and blows air directly into his muscles instead of his bones. All three Gear 4 forms gain what seems to be a scarf of clouds or steam that wraps around his neck and down his body. For Bounce Man specifically, he traps air in his upper body and coats his arms, legs, some of his neck, his sides, and his back in armament haki, which combines with his extremely stretchy rubber body, making him more durable but still very bouncy. He also gains markings around his eyes and patterns on his chest that resembles his devil fruit. While his legs are unaffected by the increase in muscle mass, they still have the properties of being very durable and bouncy. While combining this with being very top heavy, he is unable to stand straight and bounces uncontrollably instead. The upside of this is that he can use his legs kind of like high tension springs, which allow him to kick off the air and fly. Luffy's techniques in Gear 4 gain the prefixes of different animals and suffixes of different guns. For example, there's Kong Gun, Rhino Schneider, and Leo Bazooka. The only technique that doesn't have a prefix is Culverin, which is Gear 4's version of pistol. This move has the added ability of being able to twist and turn on command, making it hard to track. Most of Luffy's evolved techniques only gain the Kong prefix, like Kong Gatling and Kong Rifle. The drawbacks in Gear 4 are some of the most harsh, leaving Luffy unable to use haki for 10 whole minutes. He is able to move around if needed, but without haki he is almost completely defenseless. All three versions of Gear 4 have an ultimate technique of sorts, and the one that comes with Bounce Man is the King Kong Gun. With this technique, Luffy blows even more air into his already inflated muscles, and increases the size of his arm to be multiple times bigger than himself. As you can probably imagine, this attack has devastating destructive power. The second version of Gear 4, named Tank Man, is a form of overwhelming defense. First introduced in chapter 842, this form has the same activation as Bounce Man, but instead of spreading the air throughout his upper body, Luffy spreads it throughout his stomach area and coats it in haki, massively increasing his overall size and durability. Early in his fight against Charlotte Cracker, Luffy was able to be cut while in Bounce Man due to him having weaker haki than Cracker, but in Tank Man he can't even be pierced. Due to the nature of his opponent's abilities, that being an endless army of biscuit soldiers, we have only seen Tank Man in its full form, after Luffy ate a large amount of said biscuit soldiers. This means we still have no idea what the base version of Tank Man looks like, since the form has only been used once. The ultimate technique, aka the only technique that Tank Man has shown, is the Gum Gum Cannonball, where he absorbs the enemy into his stomach and then ejects them with massive force, sending them flying. The third and final form of Gear 4, as well as my personal favorite, is Snake Man, the form that's focused on overwhelming speed. Introduced in chapter 894 while fighting an 11-hour long battle against Charlotte Katakuri, a user of Future Sight, Luffy uses this form to attack with blinding speed, not allowing Katakuri the time to dodge. As with the previous Gear 4 forms, Luffy bites into his arm and blows air into his muscles, but instead of getting bigger like Bounce Man and Tank Man, he gets marginally taller and slightly more buff, while focusing haki on his arms and legs. Since he is not as off balance as he is in Bounce Man, he can stand still in this form and retains the ability to fly. His hair also grows a good length and stands up on ends at all times. Since Luffy has less haki covering his body, he is not as bouncy as the previous Gear 4 forms, and he is less durable and takes damage the same way he would in his base form. The Culverin technique that he uses in Bounce Man now gains the Jet prefix and is massively faster, and also has the added advantage of not only being able to bounce off the air and surrounding area, but will always accelerate as long as his arm is stretching. This means that the longer his attack is out, the faster and more powerful it will be when it eventually lands, and is near unpredictable, so even if the attack is dodged, there is a great chance it will still connect. All of Luffy's other techniques gain the names of snakes, such as Python, Black Mamba, and Snake Man's ultimate technique, King Cobra. This attack is launched at full speed and wraps all the way around Luffy twice before hitting his opponent, gaining a ton of momentum and ultimately delivering a devastating hit. Last but certainly not least, we have Gear 5, which is probably what all of you are here for. Instead of being an application of his Devil Fruit, Gear 5 is an awakening of the mythical Zoan Fruit, the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika, the true identity of Luffy's Gomu Gomu no Mi. After literally dying at the hands of Kaido, Luffy's heartbeat takes on the rhythm of the drums of liberation and he laughs almost uncontrollably. Visually, his clothes turn pure white besides the belt around his waist, his sandals, and his signature straw hat. His hair also becomes pure white and stands up on ends similar to Snake Man. His physical build doesn't change much, being the same height as his base form and gaining no muscle mass. The abilities of Gear 5 are absolutely insane, even being described as the most ridiculous power in the world. Luffy says Gear 5 is the form where he is most free, and it truly shows in the new fighting style that the form provides. With Gear 5, he gains the ability to turn the environment around him into rubber, as seen when he turned the roof of Onigashima into rubber and deflected Kaido's attack back at him. This application is not only limited to objects though, Luffy can turn other organisms into rubber, as when he was stretching Kaido's body after Kaido ate him, and when he punched through Kaido's head. Luffy also gains complete and total mastery over his stretching abilities, being able to inflate parts of his body without needing to blow into his thumb joint or muscles, which makes him able to greatly increase his strength at an instant. He's also not limited to just inflating parts of his body anymore, and is able to increase the size of his entire body, even being able to become the size of a giant. The craziest thing about Gear 5 is the Toon Force abilities it grants Luffy. In Gear 5, Luffy essentially becomes a cartoon character, being able to make his and others' eyes pop out of their head, run on air, and even grab lightning right out of the sky. The techniques Luffy gains are largely the same as his regular ones, but can obviously do things like turn his opponent's body into rubber and have a more cartoonish effect overall. The ultimate technique for Gear 5 is the Bajrang Gun. This is the strongest attack Luffy has in his entire arsenal. With this technique, Luffy expands his fist to be roughly the size of the entirety of Onigashima, coats into both armament and advanced Conqueror's Haki, and simply punches, delivering a massively devastating blow to his opponent, that being Kaido, who was defeated by this move. Gear 5 also has a pretty hefty drawback, that being it seemingly causes Luffy to age briefly after exiting the form, as well as taking a lot of energy, leaving Luffy completely exhausted after using it. However, this only seems to be if he has an extremely taxing fight like his fight versus Kaido.
So lead us. Can't handle us. So cool, big scandalous. I'll show you.